This is the LD50 Lab, so we're looking at beans and salt. So if you're reading through the background, LD50 is lethal dose, and then for over 50% of the organisms for that chemical. So we're trying to find what amount of salt kills 50% of organisms. In this case, we're looking at bean sprouts. So in the lab, we're going to dilute a stock solution. So we start out with 2 grams of salt or sodium chloride per 10 milliliters of water. So that's a 0.2 concentration. So 2 divided by 10 is how I get that 0.2 concentration. Grams divided by milliliters. That's going to be in bag 1. And then I'm going to count the number of beans germinated in 1 week. In each bag, I'm going to have 10 beans. I'm using lentils instead of mung beans because they're a little easier to find. I'm going to wrap the beans in paper towels and add the liquid once I've diluted it so that I have my complete set of experiments and salt concentrations. So the stock solution is going to be our highest percent. Then we go all the way down to 0.008 grams per 10 milliliters. So that's going to be our smallest concentration. And then we do have our control, so our pure H2O, so that would be our control. These are all our experimental groups. So you can put them in the dark. Seeds don't need light to germinate since they have all the glucose stored in the seed. But I find they grow a little bit better if you do expose them to light. So I'll put them in the window. So to do the cereal dilution, I'm going to start out with my stock solution, which you can see is kind of cloudy. So if I stir it, it'll get cloudier because that is the salt solution, so it has quite a lot of salt in it. You can compare it to the pure water, so you can see through the pure water here pretty well, but the salt water, the stock solution, difficult to see through. So for test tube 1, or for my very first baggie, I'm just going to measure out 10 milliliters of that stock solution. So I'll use a graduated cylinder for that. So I measure out my 10 milliliters. And so that's my highest concentration. I don't need to dilute it down. And then I'm going to add that to my baggie with my lentils. So for the paper towel, I'll have my paper towel out. I'll count out 10 seeds. I use 10 because that's one of my constants in my experiments, so I'm always counting out 10 seeds into the paper towel. And also because it's easy to look at percentage of seeds that have sprouted after this. We're using 10s. Need one more. So after I've counted out my seeds, I'm just going to wrap them in the paper towel. So the paper towel is going to absorb the water, the salt water, but not make the seeds too wet or too dry. If the seeds were too wet, it would kill all of them anyway. And we're wanting some of them, hopefully, to grow, but more dependent on the salt concentration. So I'll take my paper towel, take my 10 milliliters of salt water, add it to a baggie, So this is my bag number 1. So I add my lentils in, and then I add my salt concentration in. So that water will travel up the paper towel. Most of my seeds are down here, so you can actually see them through the paper towel. So I know they're getting exposure to that salt water. So then I'm just going to leave this. I like to leave it in the window again, just so they get a little bit of light, because I find it helps speed up the sprouting process. But you can leave them in the dark because they do have glucose in the seeds to help with cellular respiration. So for my cereal dilution, I'm going to follow these steps here. So I'm going to first, well, I've already done step 1, so I'm going to move on to this next step. So I'm going to put half of the stock solution, so 25 milliliter stock solution, into a graduated cylinder. Then I'm going to add an equal amount of water, so pure water. And what that's going to do is cut down my percentage of salt by half. So I started out with 2 grams of salt per 10 milliliters of water. So that's my stock solution. So I measure out my stock solution, add it to my mixing beaker. Then I measure out my pure water, again 25 milliliters. So I want an equal amount. So 25 milliliters there of pure water. So I've cut my salt concentration in half now, so you can see it's still cloudy, but not quite as cloudy as that 2% or 0.2% concentration. So I'm going to add this to my test tube 1. Well, I'm going to add part of this mixture to test tube 1. So I'm going to measure out 10 milliliters. Again, because that's going to be one of my constants in the experiment. I'm always putting in the same amount in each baggie. So I'm always putting in 10 milliliters of water in it, of varying salt concentrations in each test tube, in each baggie. So that's going to be my test tube 1. So now I have 50 milliliters minus 10, so 40 milliliters total of water in here. But I need to get it back down to 25. So I'm going to measure out 15 milliliters of my combined salt and pure water. And so that gets me down to 25 milliliters left in the mixed combined cup here. I just pour the 15 milliliters down the drain because I don't need it anymore. So now this is my 0.1 concentration. And then I'm going to dilute it further, so I'm going to, again, this is 25 milliliters, I'm going to add 25 milliliters of pure water to that 0.1% concentration. Now I've halved the amount of salt in my solution again. So now I have 0.5 grams of salt per 10 milliliters of water. And I'm just going to continue this process. So I'm first going to mix it a little bit. I'll measure out the 10 milliliters again because that's my constant. I'm keeping a couple things constant in my experiment. This is test tube 2 with that 0.1 or 0.5. So I'm keeping the amount of solution the same in each test tube and then in each baggie. And then I'm also keeping the amount of seeds or lentils the same in each baggie. So I'm doing 10 milliliters of liquid, 10 lentils in each bag, So each time I'm diluting by half. So this was my 0.5 here. I'm going to add another 25 milliliters of water. So this is the pure water. So I have less and less salt in my water, so I'm reducing the salt concentration by half each time. Again, I'm going to measure out 10 milliliters. That's going to go in test tube number 3. Then I have to measure out the 15 so that I can get down to 25 milliliters again of my saltwater solution. Then I add the 25 milliliters of pure water. Mix it around a little bit. Keep going. So forth. So after I've finished my dilution, I'll put them all in the baggies with the paper towels with the seeds, and then I'll leave them for a week. The next week, we'll count how many seeds have grown in each section.